Creative Mornings is a global breakfast speaker series that happens in a whole lot of places. I won't read all the numbers. And every month there is a shared global theme, and every chapter across the world finds a local, creative, interesting person to speak somewhat related to that theme. Charlottesville has been lucky enough to have a chapter for 5 years now. I see people doing math. 5 to 6 years now, I think. And we're so happy to continue to find new people, be in new spaces, and find great speakers. Our theme this month is trust, and illustration by Ibrahim Nasir. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but every chapter gets to also give ideas for a theme, and then like a couple years later they get selected. So next month is Charlottesville's theme, which is very exciting and 5 to 6 years in the making. So stay tuned for that. I mean, come anyway. Come regardless of where the theme is from.
What's the theme?
You'll find out on the 1st. There's like a global NDA about it. But this month is about trust. Many thanks to our local partners, University of Virginia, UVA Arts, New City Arts, and the Fralin Museum of Art at the University of Virginia. And so have a few announcements from each of them, starting with UVA Arts and the Theater Festival. Yeah.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Olivia. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we have going on with the Theater Festival this summer. We are getting ready to close Little Shop of Horrors, but you still have 4 chances left to see it.
It's
tonight.
So good.
It's so
good.
It's so good. Tonight at 7:30, tomorrow at 2 and 7:30, and then on Sunday at 2. And then next week, starting, I believe, the 25th, we are opening the 39 Steps, which is also very fun. Both shows are super fun, like Emma said, and the performers are just incredible. So we would love to see you at the theater this summer. You can visit our website, virginiatheaterfestival.org, for more information, or feel free to just come ask me after the talk.
I was also at Little Shop of Horrors last night, and it's great, and I highly recommend it. New City Arts has a couple of events happening this month. So there is a curator talk for the current show, which is about board games and how they interact kind of with culture, how they reflect culture, how they try to influence culture. And so Chandler, who curated it, is also working on his own game. And so he's giving a talk and also guiding a playthrough of his game, Consensus. So Google or QR code right now. And then also there's New City Arts and Crafts with coffee and pastries for young ones and people chaperoning young ones on the 24th. And then the Fralin Museum of Art. If you haven't seen, they have the Little Museum of Art, which is like a this big little museum out front, and they have a call for photographers, pointing at the people that are here with cameras, but also other people that might be photographers without them. Application on the website and also at the QR code. They are currently closed while they change over exhibitions, but it'll reopen August 30th. So if you have not been to the Fralin, you can't go right now, but you can go soon. And also thanks to our host, WTJU, for letting us into their studio and event space. And real fast, MG wants to speak about what's going on here.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Garner McGee, and I work here at WTJU. If you're watching during that last activity, thankfully I do not work on the music side of things. My sense of rhythm is terrible, but I run the podcast collective here. So how many of y'all have heard of WTJU before? Yay! Okay, that's great. So we're a non-commercial community radio station that's owned by UVA. We've been on the air for 67 years now. And we have a couple different things going on. So one of them is, the flagship 91.1 FM community radio station over 200 volunteer DJs and subs, so if you're interested in getting on the air, you can go on our website and submit an application with like a playlist and stuff. We also do multiple free live concerts, so every Friday night at 8 o'clock we have blues, folk, jazz music here on the stage. And we recently started a rock series too, so every third Saturday of the month we have a rock show. All that is also on our website. We have a second FM signal. It's a low power FM, so it doesn't go the 40 miles that WTJU does. You can hear it here in town or online. And that is all student hosted. It's called WXTJ. And they play like everything under the sun. Like I swear every time I turn it on, it's like a completely different kind of music. And here in the summer, we actually have local high schoolers on the air most of the like business hours. And then we have one of my favorite parts of WTJ, which is podcasting. We have a podcast collective with over 20 active podcasts and audio dramas and some limited run series. And we also have a podcast studio upstairs. If anybody wants to hang out after the talk, I'm really happy to give tours of upstairs. And anybody can use that. I can give you my card. We can get you set up in the system. It's just first come, first serve. Also, if you have an existing podcast, you have a podcast idea, there's 2 of us on staff that meet with people all the time who have podcast ideas or have existing podcasts and just kind of help them like brainstorm or talk about audience or connect them with other podcasters in town. And then about a year ago, we also started publishing like a short book series. Erin O'Hare has been one of our DJs for a really long time. She's also a local reporter who's currently with Charlottesville Tomorrow.
She was also a speaker for Creative Mornings 2 months ago.
Oh,
too,
really?
so
Did she talk about Under the Table and Screaming
She
already?
did.
Okay, so
But so
we
many people
also
like people
have
here. Yeah.
an amazing zine series that she like did such an like incredible job with. It's 5 books about like the history of music in Charlottesville. And then lastly, we have a bunch of educational programming, including that high school DJ program I mentioned, and also summer camps for kids, which just wound down, and some programs for UVA students too. So the last thing I wanted to highlight was a couple resources available to y'all. So the first one is that podcast studio I mentioned. Like I said, if you're interested in using that, 1, I can show you around today, and 2, I'll give you a card and we can get you in the system. And then the other one is this room. You can book this room if you're interested in using it for an event you have coming up, as long as it's, for like a nonprofit, non-commercial purpose. We've had comedy shows down here. We had a meeting for a new like grocery co-op down here, like all kinds of fun stuff. And you can just reserve that on our website by clicking the Get Involved button or submit a request to reserve it. And then lastly, we have a bunch of swag. It's on the table back there. You are welcome to it. Take some extras, take it back to where you work or your favorite coffee shop or something like that. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like, a lot of people raise their hand. I feel like WTJU is rightfully well known. I just want to second XTJ, the student station. The first time I heard about it, I was like, I wonder what, like, students right now would do as radio DJs, and it was them whisper reading their gender studies textbooks to each other between songs, and I was like, yeah, I wouldn't have guessed it, but that feels right, and it was great, so highly recommend. Also, thank you to Ian and Corbin for video and photography work, and to Creative Morning Charlottesville organizing team, as always, Emma and Maureen and Corey for letting us do this. If you'd like to be a volunteer, please reach out at charlottesvillecreativemornings.com. And a lot of people are here for the first time. The 2 ways people find out about Creative Mornings are either a friend is speaking or a friend tells them about the event. So if you enjoy yourselves, we do this every 3rd Friday. Bring a friend next time. Let them know this exists. Help kind of spread the network. And finally, last thing this morning, we always have someone read the Creative Mornings manifesto. Does anyone want to volunteer to read the manifesto today? Yeah, thank you.
Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections and learning from others in hugs and high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in the neighborhoods and cities. Everyone is welcome.
Thank you so much. And then now is when I had Pat Adams' intro pulled up, and then it closed. So let me awkwardly talk slowly while I pull up Adam's intro. I also know you're going to intro yourself, so.
I'm going to talk about myself.
You're going to talk about yourself a lot, so I feel bad that I'm like wasting time of your time doing this. Adam Nemett is an author. I'm just going to wing it. It's going to be worse. You're an author. You're a filmmaker, a coworker of mine. That's like the least important thing. You are a founder of Mima, which we got a taste of, and a permaculture homesteader.
Sure, that sounds great.
Adam does a lot of things, and you're going to learn a lot about it now, and I'm going to stop eating up his time and let him talk to you.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to like loiter up here until
Make sure that,
we know the AV is working.
come on, there we go.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Creative Mornings, for inviting me. Thanks, WTJU, for hosting. Title of my talk is When the Apocalypse is Over, I Hope You Like Your Job. That's taken from a lyric from a John Craigie song, who's actually playing at the Jefferson in October. He's great. My wife and I love him. And in terms of I hope you like your job, my job has always been superhero. I don't have like a big cataclysmic origin story that I'm going to go through exactly. I've just always known that I was a superhero. That's me at age 3, just totally feeling it. This really continued. Yeah, my superpower was like thighs, legs and thighs, and just radiating strength. This has really continued into adulthood. I'm actually not like a comic book guy. A lot of people assume that. There's a line in my novel that a bunch of interviewers hit on when I was doing book tour stuff early on. When a character mentions a comic book trope, and the protagonist, David Fuffman, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he says, "My relationship to superheroes is mystical, not fundamentalist." And I think that's pretty close to how I feel. My main superpower is that I can occasionally see the future. Not visually, I don't foresee every single little thing, but I get visions sometimes of what's going to happen in the future. And maybe that's true of all speculative fiction writers. I should say that my main weakness, like my kryptonite, is like PowerPoint design, keynote design. So apologies to all the graphic designers in the room. There's some really terrible stuff here. That's my weakness. I'll explain what I mean by seeing the future in a second, but I wanted to share these other quotes. This is from an anthology that I'll also talk about in a sec. Here's a line from the introduction. "Every single generation has imagined itself uniquely in crisis and fantasized that theirs will be the one that witnesses the end." I'll hit on that idea of fantasized. There's this psychological phenomenon called l'appel du vide. I'm sure someone who speaks French better could say that better. But it translates to the call of the void. This is when you have, stay with me, but this is when you have that kind of weird intrusive thought when you're like driving on a 2-lane highway, or you come to like the edge of a tall building with like a nice view, and there's like that flash of like, what would happen if I drove into the other lane, or what would happen if I fell or jumped off? And you don't need to call anyone for me, I promise. This is actually an evolutionary response that we all have, and it's developed because the body does not detect enough fear, and it needs to sort of remind the body of like, ooh, you're in kind of a dangerous situation and you're not paying attention enough to that. So it will create this flash of the worst case scenario of what could happen, and the system kind of uses that to help you appropriately avoid that worst case scenario. To me, speculative fiction is like the literary equivalent of the call of the void. The flip side of that coin is this quote. So most people muddle through good times and bad without ever assuming that the end is upon them, while a small but intense segment of society feels compelled to fix the time and prepare for it, sometimes in terribly destructive ways. So I think the important thing is that every generation feels it's at the end times. We're not alone in that. I don't think we're delusional about it either. I just think that there are people out there always on the front lines kind of working hard to make sure it's not the end times, and that's why humanity's still here. Maybe there are some other people who believe they're fixing things when they're actually kind of accidentally being quite destructive. And then there's like the supervillains, right? The folks who have seen that call of the void and are like so tempted by it that they're actively rushing toward it. I think a huge problem with this is the idea of superheroes, this superhero complex. To bring it to the idea of trust, placing our trust in superheroes is what I feel is ultimately somewhat problematic for our species. So humans like tend to abdicate responsibility, and we look towards these superheroes, these leaders to save us. This is a great article by Rebecca Solnit, if anyone knows that author. And it reminds us that when we hand over our power to these heroic figures, we're actually kind of relinquishing the strength that can be found in the masses, in the community. Nobody in this room is going to save the world solo, probably, but because of things like the hero's journey and comic books and a lot of Hollywood films, we're conditioned to just think that that's how it's going to be. There's going to be some sort of superhero that comes along and just fixes it, that singular hero, instead of masses of people making incremental progress. At worst, we create these statues and literally place individual, single people, sometimes very flawed people, on pedestals. Sorry for throwing a little shade to TJ in the halls of WTJU. But that's not to say we shouldn't like respect leaders who step forward, and like especially if they seem like unwilling to be leaders and they're like morally sound people and they don't want to be the figurehead, but here they are. But at best, like we don't just follow them blindly. We step up and join them in leading the way together. So that's sort of the agenda I have for today. If you're, interested in responding to the call of the void in a healthy and a healthy way and averting destruction, I'm going to make an argument that trust and trusting the collective is greater than trusting heroes and gods. I'm going to explore a bit of how I've approached that theme in my creative life in 4 different ways. Music education nonprofit called Mima that you guys just experienced a bit of. Feature-length film about music called The Instrument that kind of came out of Mima. I'll talk about a speculative fiction novel that's in the back of the room called We Can Save Us All, and then a real-life self-reliance experiment that I'm doing with my family right now called Thunderbird Disco. I'm going to go pretty quickly, and it'll be kind of hodgepodgey and messy because this is a room full of creatives. Sometimes I have much more like thin through line and focus, but I'm going to throw like everything in the kitchen sink in here and just hope that it makes sense. But let me also add the disclaimer that like everything you're about to see is largely due to the fact that I have incredible luck and incredible privilege to have had all these experiences. I understand this is largely to credit for my overdeveloped sense of confidence that my wife can attest to, and my willingness to trust that like if I just keep charging forward, good things will happen. I get that not everyone has that experience, and I'm very lucky to have been like born in this body and have that experience. I'll also share that I'm not going to talk a lot about my day job at Willow Tree, which a few colleagues are here. Happy to talk about it at some point. We're hiring right now. And so, come talk to me about it afterwards. But I'm going to try and stay focused on these creative aspects, all of which are only due to the fact that I have a great job that helps support my creative habit. Does that sound good? Cool. All right, so I'm going to show my age. And I went to college from 1999 to 2003, which was a heady time with a lot of major transition. There was Columbine shooting, the Bush-Gore elections, 9/11 wars, and really like the advent of cell phones and social media. That was all kind of happening in the 4 years when I was in college. I went to a public high school in Baltimore, and when I got to Princeton, they had this pretty homogenous social scene where all of the music was created by like this weird corporatized network of DJs called DJ Bob collectively. They only played top 40 music. top 40 music can be super fun, when you're just like grinding on the dance floor. But I had fallen in love with jam bands and electronic music and jazz and world music and all these different kinds of things in high school. And I found a few like-minded people freshman year, and we started this thing called MIMA, Modern Improvisational Music Appreciation, which was a big fancy word, and it helped us get some funding from the university. Mainly we had the goal of exposing the campus to different forms of music, bringing bands on campus and leveraging lots of on-campus musicians, and then taking folks off campus into New York and Philly and surrounding Trenton and surrounding areas to see music there. Ultimately, I wanted to try and create a more dynamic social scene based on what I felt was like a really positive communal feeling that I'd experienced at all these concerts and raves in high school that were very life-changing in a really positive way. Sometimes it gets a bad rap. It was great. It was only great. Went really well. And soon we were throwing a major party every month or so with like tons of campus musicians and DJs, and then some big name acts like John Schofield and Disco Biscuits and Antibalas Afrobeat Orchestra and Willie Nelson, and just like a ton of DJ and rave events. This is very 1999 graphic design here. Around this time, I started feeling something like founder syndrome and just like holding on too tight to the feeling of being very responsible for creating a certain kind of energy on campus. I think my ego was getting really wrapped up in it, and it was like my baby. And I remember one of my best friends, Dave, like grabbing me by the shoulders at a rave, and he was like, "It's not your job to make sure everyone's having a good time." And I don't think I realized that. I think I really felt like it was. I had taken this on as like my persona on campus, as like this party thrower and good time guy. And the idea of being able to change that or evolve from that or just like leave it behind was really foreign to me. But I stepped away and I handed off MIMA to a guy named Christoph. Around that time, a guy named Caleb Dance, who was displaced, he was at Tulane and displaced from Hurricane Katrina and ended up on the Princeton campus. That's him right there. Yeah, in 2005. He showed up, and it was an incredible decision to hand it off to folks like Caleb and Christoph, because they basically took this group of campus musicians and started bringing them off campus to offer after-school music education programs in Trenton and Newark and elsewhere, and ultimately transformed it into this 501c3 nonprofit and international NGO. I'll get back to it in a second, but it was basically just like a really clear indication to me that there was some wisdom in letting things go and stepping away and kind of shifting one's persona when it's no longer serving you. Graphic design, thank you. I don't think I made that flyer, but this was a flyer from a show. I started working really working with one of the bands who was one of our MIMA bands on campus called Zucchera. Yes, it's a silent J. And I was this like weird storyteller, madcap poet, white boy rap kind of component of a much larger band. And I was without a doubt not leading anything, which was really nice. I was just part of this ensemble with much more talented musicians. I couldn't play any music, which is why I did all this stuff to overcompensate for not being a musician. But I got really into the idea of ensembles and how groups of people work together and what role each one plays. I'm not a big horoscope guy, but I got really into this other personality system called the Enneagram. How many people have heard of the Enneagram? Okay. Cool. So I started using this a lot in my life and my creative work. I'm definitely a 3. I'll get back to that. But what I like compared to some of like horoscopes and some other systems are these arrows that go between the different points. And the idea of these arrows is that each personality trends towards one other point when they're feeling a lot of trust, when they're feeling really confident, really safe, really comfortable, and they'll trend towards like the most healthy part of a different point in that moment. And when you're feeling stressed or distrust or nervous in some way or just uncomfortable, you'll trend towards the worst part of another point. There's books and books about this, and I have a slide at the end where I have some titles and websites and things like that. But I'm a 3, at least that's how I identify. My wife reminded me last night that I'm the kind of person who likes getting up in front of a group of people and talking about myself. Not everyone is like that, right? But I like need that a little bit. I'm very much a 3. And I tend to become, she'll also probably tell you that, I tend to become somewhat passive aggressive, avoiding, and vengeful, like an unhealthy 9 when I'm feeling like, not trusting or not great. And when I'm feeling trust and security, the more vain parts of my personality become like more cooperative and, concerned with others and committed to those things, like a more healthy 6. I think this system, to me, helps explain why we all exhibit like these different kinds of behaviors when we're in different social situations or around different kinds of people. I was a religion major and I did a creative writing minor in school, and I started writing this pretty sprawling piece about musical ritual. And it had these long descriptions of choreography and the sound that the music was making and these intricate details of costumes that I was envisioning. And ultimately my workshop professor and thesis advisor, who was the very prolific author Joyce Carol Oates, said, I feel like you want this to be a movie and you kind of want to like hear it instead, and rather than a very long short story. She was probably kidding or like giving me harsh criticism that like it wasn't working as a piece of fiction, but I took her literally because she was Joyce Carol Oates. And so I tried to write a screenplay and produce this feature-length narrative film about musical ritual. In the movie, these 7 different art students are selected to live in an interactive musical workshop for a month, and they have to execute 7 different rituals in order to like they open these doors and and they have to gain this inheritance left by the workshop's creator named Arthur. It's kind of like a Willy Wonka meets, I don't know, like Real World meets David Lynch something. And I used the Enneagram to create the ensemble of characters, each one individually, and what ritual they might, gravitate toward, and each one's character arc. And it was super helpful. I highly recommend if anyone's writing something or thinking of an ensemble group and trying to figure out how different characters might interact in different combinations. It was just a really helpful system. Real quick, in order to create the musical workshop, the primary set for the film where all these students live for a month, we organized the class at Maryland Institute College of Art, where about 20 artists from different departments collaborated with a group of undergrads from Princeton, musicians, computer scientists, filmmakers, and we created this space called The Instrument, and it was wild. All these different spaces of the room served as the venue for different rituals, and the idea was that certain like sculptural things would like make noise when you did stuff to them. They didn't actually in real life, but we made it look that way on film. And the truth is I trusted my vision for what the movie was going to be, but I had never made a film before and I had no idea what I was doing. And I had to like figure it out as I went along. And the first cut of the film was 4.5 hours, the way it was scripted, because I was stupid. And I realized I'd scripted it all wrong, and I should have asked for help more. And so we had to do a lot of fixing in post. The film got it down to 1 hour and 40 minutes, and then the film got exactly 76 rejection letters from film festivals. I highly recommend, we're all, sometimes I'm giving these talks to like college students. Probably everyone in this room has already experienced this, but if you haven't, I highly recommend getting like 30 or more rejection letters early in your artistic career. It really thickens the skin, and it's just a fact of this business we've all chosen. It did get into a few festivals, it got some nice reviews, and it was generally a pretty insane experience that took a lot of years off my life. But I think it helped me get into grad school, helped me learn how to produce stories with ensemble casts. I'll try playing this 2-minute trailer just to give you a little taste. Keep in mind this was shot in the summer of 2002, so mini DV had just come out. It was like just possible to like make one's own film, but this was before anyone could afford HD cameras. That wasn't a thing yet. So the resolution's low by today's standards. It's not the Wi-Fi in here, it's just what the movie looks like.
Only if you feel called to play.
0, a being of sound. You hereby declare this instrument to be my last will and
You've inherited sacred space.
I think you'll find that Arthur has some secrets.
You are the musicians that have been chosen
What do you believe in? You really want to know?
to perform 7 ritual ceremonies.
Compositions must work together.
You always attitude.
The main element within these rituals is music.
I had a weird dream last night.
Maybe you're just getting much better at being awake.
You think I'm crazy, dude?
So there's a couple fun cameos in there. That guy that you just saw, the main character, is Hilton Carter, who's a huge plant influencer now on Instagram. Some of you probably follow him. He's got a show on Magnolia Network. And Cornell West was my religion thesis advisor. Whoops. And so he shows up there too. He was nice enough to help out. Okay. Charging forward. By this point, we were living in Manhattan. I'd just gotten rejected from 76 film festivals. And then after getting rejected by a bunch of MFA programs, I got into the new school. One of the other students there was editing a short story anthology called The Apocalypse Reader, and he really wanted Joyce Carol Oates' email address. So he asked me for the address, and he was like, also, I'm putting this anthology together. It's mostly like big name writers, but if you have like a short 2 or 3 page piece of flash fiction about the apocalypse, I'm happy to consider it. And I think he was just being nice because he wanted Joyce Carol Oates' email address. But you take what you can get. So I was not writing about the apocalypse. I was writing about how I used to dress up as Superman as a kid. But I was like, okay, I'll give something a shot. I had just seen this documentary called Hi Hitler on the History Channel about how many drugs Hitler was on during his reign, which kind of makes sense. It was also 2005, so it was right around when Hurricane Katrina happened. So I did a little like what if scenario and thought about what if like a modern day apocalyptic flood came into a college campus and this drug-addled, cultish, kind of destructive leader rose to power during this moment. And he accepted it, and I was very pumped about that. It was my first publication next to all these big name writers. I was just ecstatic. And then I was like, hey, that worked, so I'm just going to keep writing about the apocalypse and see if I can turn this 3-page story into a novel. I started, it's called We Can Save Us All, and it's about this group of college students led by 3 freshmen who respond to the coming climate apocalypse by forming an end times commune based on superheroes or inspired by superheroes. And it ultimately devolves into more of a cult, but I don't want to spoil it. It was definitely inspired by Mima and my experience on campus, but then I just tried to push everything to the most insane level possible and like what would be the worst decision this character could make in this moment rather than a healthy decision. And I tried to cast the characters, this ensemble, with like actual actors at the time. Some of them ended up being really problematic later on. So this was 2005. And I used the Enneagram to think about their personalities as well as what their superhero alter egos would be. None of them actually has like magical mutant powers in the book. They're all just mortal college kids, kind of self-made like Batman. But in the sense of when the apocalypse is over, I hope you like your job, each one has a passion or a skill or an interest that they try to elevate in this end times moment to sort of a superpower level, complete with costumes and superhero names. So that's the main protagonist, Businessman, and then there's Ultraviolet on the top, and Golden Echo, who's like a music guy, and Peacemaker, who's sort of a bodyguard, It Girl, who's very chameleon-like. They all have kind of a thing. I transferred from New School to California College of the Arts in San Francisco, which is an amazing program. I love it. Can't say enough good things about it. If you know anyone who's contemplating MFA programs. I got partway through a first draft, but it had all these like outlandish sci-fi elements like rogue planets and weird shit. And this was around the time of An Inconvenient Truth that came out in 2006. And I took a class the next semester with Leslie Carroll Roberts called An Inconvenient Art, and was reading all of this climate change stuff. And it totally changed everything I was writing. Rather than creating some sort of otherworldly sci-fi rogue planet, I realized it was the conflict I was interested in was climate change and this human versus nature, or human versus their own nature kind of conflict. I read this book also by Rebecca Solnit, who I mentioned earlier, and it's called A Paradise Built in Hell. She looks at history, at these major disasters from the 1906 San Francisco earthquake all the way through Hurricane Katrina. And despite what we think we know about them and how the media portrays it, all the chaos and looting or whatever we think is happening, government and elites generally fail miserably to protect people in these moments. And in reality, on the grassroots level, it's these amazing communities of people who step up and take very good care of each other by forming these improvisational mutual aid societies. That's where the help tends to come from a lot, at least in the early stages. And she kind of chronicles all of these different moments throughout history where that's happened. I was around this time, I was getting a little tired of working in a very solitary fashion on my novel, and I was really missing the improvisational community of MIMA, which had been cranking away. By this time, the organization started working with the U.S. State Department and going on these cultural envoy trips all over the world, bringing it to ultimately about 40 countries. We don't walk into these communities with a set songbook and say like, hey, here's a bunch of American music for you to learn. Like, pick up your instrument, let's go. It's generally not based on music, not based on instruments. If people have them, that's great. But if you don't, you use your body, you use your voice, you use your whatever you have, buckets, whatever you have at your disposal. The program is a framework where students come up with their own rhythms, their own melodies, their own lyrics and stories, and then we help structure it into verse, chorus, bridge, and create music videos and professional recordings out of it. But it always sounds very hyper-localized. It sounds like the community where we're in. Brazil sounds like Brazil. Nepal sounds like Nepal. Cyprus sounds like Cyprus. Charlottesville sounds like Charlottesville. And it's ultimately a trust-building program, I think, more than it is like teaching a lot about how to be an amazing musician. It's teaching people how to interact with each other, how to lead, how to follow, how to give and receive constructive criticism, and ultimately create this collaborative piece of music that belongs to all of them, but no one of them controls. No one of them is ever like the leader. Everyone is playing their role in the ensemble. And it's super fun. There's Caleb again. Caleb, where was that one from? Harlem? Yeah. Yeah, it's super fun. When I moved to Charlottesville around 2013, and then Caleb moved to Lexington at the time, like right around that time, he was our board chair, we decided to open a new chapter in Central Virginia, and this is now our headquarters. I don't run the day-to-day anymore, but I played a part in kind of getting the thing up on its feet in Charlottesville, and we have this amazing network of teachers and administrators now and host institutions. And I tried my best to remember history and then handed it off to those folks, once it was sort of on its feet. And there's some really passionate and motivated people who now run the day-to-day. I think I might skip how many people here are like writers looking for agents currently? Is that like a thing a lot of people are interested in? If not, I might skip fast through this section. The short version is that I started, I was writing this thing. I got to, just to give you the timeline, I started writing in 2005. I finished a draft and started looking for agents in 2010. And the book was ultimately published in 2018. So if you do the math there, that's 13 years from start to finish. I would love to say that I put it aside for 5 or 7 years and didn't think about it and then picked it back up. But it was pretty consistent for all that long. And I think part of it was that I trusted much of the feedback I was getting from agents. I was just revising, rather than holding on too tight of like, this is my work, and if you don't like it, screw you. It was like, all right, what's the feedback here? I'm going to revise it, and I'll take 3 months to change it and then send it back out again. And, just kept revising, and went from linear to nonlinear, all these things. But then in like 2011, my wife sent me this email that said, take a look at this picture. This is you. You are not one of the people who needs help. Your work is good and strong, and you will find the right agent for it. So yeah, remember that and act like this guy in the photo. And I was like, you're great. I want to have your baby. So we had this kid, and I kept tinkering with the book. And meanwhile, I kept collecting these rejections, and they weren't wrong. I hadn't brought the world to life sufficiently enough. So I'm sharing a few like sort of sketchy floor plans I made for The Egg, which is the geodesic dome that all the characters live in when they create this sort of off-campus commune. And for me, it's like helpful to know that there's like a wood stove in the center of this geodesic dome, which means there's a stovepipe that reaches up through the roof, which means that if a character walks into the front door, the space might look like being inside a balloon with a magician's giant pin sticking through it. And so going back to the theme of trust, like when people use the term trust your vision, sometimes that can be shorthand for like, don't listen to anyone else, or you know what you're doing, and that can at worst, I think, lead to some laziness and hubris. I think there's ways to really flesh out your vision and keep revising your vision and keep fleshing it out to make it more real, which ultimately gives the fake world that you're creating a better chance of succeeding. Here's the basement layer. I'll just kind of skip through this. Here's an aerial view of the cul-de-sac. And so every story has some danger, right? And so apocalyptic wise, this is around the time that certain apocalyptic forces came a bit closer to home. And I'll add a trigger warning here real quick, because we're going to show some Charlottesville stuff. I'm not going to show video or anything, but just want to prepare. We marched in Washington. I started getting involved in some of the local politics, Blue Ribbon Commission meetings around the Lee statue in Charlottesville. I was protesting, but also feeling like more exposed. And I had this baby, and my wife's office was like right here at the time, and my son's preschool was a block away. And then our daughter was born on July 30th, 2017, so 2 weeks before the events of August 11th and 12th. And I really debated stopping around this time, stopping any creative work. It just felt like I sort of lost my sense of trust in the vision or in the process or whatever. And it felt like there were just much more important things at stake. And I felt, I was looking over my shoulder all the time. And it was just freaky. I've always found that support from my wife, my family, my friends is the best kind of Popeye's spinach. And I got this email from my cousin, Jason, who said, I was going to just throw it all away. I hadn't found an agent yet and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, hey man, the book's as good as it's ever been. Make it a numbers game. Prepare to be rejected a lot in search of that one enthusiastic hell yes. Pick yourself up and keep grinding and do what you do. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go get 100 rejection letters. I've gotten 76 before. I'm going to shoot for 100 this time. And let's see, I had my trusty agent spreadsheet. I went back to people who'd rejected me years ago, whom I thought might be willing to read the most recent revision. And I finally found that hell yes from a guy named Noah. This came exactly almost 7 years after I first submitted, April 13th, 2010, and then this is April 12th, 2017, so a good 7 years of agent searching to the day. Went out on submission, and after a bunch more rejections, it finally got accepted and it sold to a publisher called The Unnamed Press in December 2017. I'm signing the contract here, very on brand. And then the book was released November 13th, 2018, a full 13 years after I started writing it. I think the title speaks to a kind of trust in the collective over the individual, but the book is also really about what happens when people give over their sense of right and wrong and trust only in a singular, give that over to a singular leader and a cult of personality. Rather than read a part of it, I'm just going to show this book trailer that was produced by local filmmakers who's now our Willow Tree colleague, Zach Phillips. I didn't have anything to do with the production here other than the fact that they used my narration and our garage. But I really like what they produced. So here's the first two paragraphs.
It was an evolved consciousness. Sorry. For the record, David Fuffman never assumed Matthias Blue was real. Real meaning unenhanced, unadulterated. Only that Matthias's was an evolved consciousness. Though David would likely fail to comprehend the extent of Matthias's genius, he'd be among the tawdry heroes who faked greatness, who sat at the feet of Matthias's being and came to class. David only and infinitely believed in him, and now the power is going off and the light is leaving them, maybe forever. The tide is coming in. For the record, David Fuffman.
Okay. All right, I'm going to charge forward. I know we're getting close to time. For the follow-up, my agent started talking to me about writing another novel, and I had a couple ideas, but I also really didn't and don't feel finished with the idea of climate change. I think of my kids, these weird little superheroes, and what kinds of changes are going to happen in their lifetimes. I think I was also deeply impacted by the events of August 12th in our town and wanting to feel less dependent on the systems and institutions in our town and just like a little bit more reliant and trusting of neighbors and immediate kind of local surroundings. So rather than speculate in a fictional setting, my family embarked on this real life experiment on our property in Charlottesville, which my wife named Thunderbird Disco. And a great thing about fiction is also a great thing about owning a home or a property. Like you can change stuff around and like make it whatever you want to make it and call it weird things. So in real life, the stakes are a little higher than the fictional world. It's actual world building. So as we got into this homesteading project, we figured it might be a good idea to take some similar precautions as I was taking in fiction and make some maps of our own. Our friend Sanjay came over and did some drone photography and video of our property. We made these maps. We started exploring what kind of changes we would want to make to live a more self-reliant and sustainable lifestyle. We like laminated this map and would draw on it to plot out what we wanted to do next. And we started taking on 10 categories of homesteading projects and capture it all at thunderbirddisco.com. And at some point in the future, we might do like another experiment where we like turn off the power for 3 weeks and see how we do. We'll find out. To be clear, when we started this, we knew absolutely zero about any of this stuff, except maybe the arts and spirituality section down here. But you know, the point of it all was to do it collaboratively and not just wall ourselves off in some sort of doomsday bunker. So, you know, when I say self-reliance, it wasn't to figure it out by ourselves. It was to collaborate and learn from our neighbors and skilled friends and local professionals who know a lot more than we do about this stuff. We've tried hard to take a beginner's mindset and share all the knowledge we can in a very accessible, kind of beginnerish sort of way. But pretty quickly, people would see this and they would be like, "Are you a doomsday prepper? That's ugh." And you know, it's got a pretty bad brand, and I think that's somewhat deserved because a lot of what you see and a lot of what I was researching about preparedness in the early days was just about stockpiling resources, mainly guns and ammunition. The weekend of March 7th, 2020, so that's March 7th, that's the weekend before we all went into lockdown and didn't quite know it yet. We had just gotten solar panels installed, and then I went to this survival expo in Louisville, Kentucky, and had a pretty fascinating and pretty bleak experience there. But it really brought home the notion of trust to me. So much of this notion of preparedness was about distrusting other human beings there. How can I prepare to kill as many of them as possible who are trying to hurt me or take my stuff? But I did some really interesting interviews with folks who had a more nuanced view there and came to the idea that ultimately if the shit hits the fan, the most precious and irreplaceable resource is a fully grown human being with a couple decades worth of skills and knowledge and experience. So I wrote about this for a pretty lengthy Rolling Stone article called Journal of a Progressive Prepper. It's paywalled on the Rolling Stone site, but if you go to thunderbirdisco.com and look for the article Buying a Knife at a Gun Show, you'll find a full version of the article there. And at the end of the article, I have a link to a Google form a sort of template that I created to start your own neighborhood mutual aid network if you're interested in that sort of thing. It's like a questionnaire that asks for basic info, but then also asks like what resources or assistance you might need during a time of difficulty, and like an extended power outage, for instance, and then what resources or skills might you be able to provide to others, not just like canned goods, but translation services or childcare or a ride somewhere or something like that. And the goal here was really to create a communal sense of trust rather than panic during difficult times. I won't show this video right now, but if you want to come along for the ride and learn more about what we're doing in our spare time, check out thunderbirdisco.com. We have this intro video on the site that shares some of the early story. We're going to continue to add to it as we go. And ultimately, we're looking for fellow travelers who know how to do stuff and might be able to teach and learn together. I have this dream of like setting up a little annual mini festival on our property where people come together and teach each other and learn how to do stuff and just hang out. So I think there's a best case scenario. Oh, whoops. Oh, that's pretty cute. I'll show it later if there's time. I'll show it real quick. He's so cute. If it works. No. I'll just keep going. We're almost at time, so maybe I'll go back to it if we have time at the end. I want to bring it back full circle and share that MEMA is now going stronger than ever. We have an upcoming teacher training on August 10th. And our Summer Vibes tour is about to kick off. We're going to be on this like wild bus going to various locations. It's going to be super fun. Please come check us out and learn more and recommend friends to be paid teaching artists. We pay all of our teaching artists. So if there are musicians in the room, I know there's at least 2 teaching artists here already, but if there's other folks who are interested, come send an email or come check us out at one of these events. We're in a ton of schools right now and other host institutions. We did more programs last semester than we've ever done. And here's my attempt to summarize. When we look at time through this greater scope, a longer period, longer timeline, some of the charge of this particular moment can become a little bit more neutralized. I think if we see it along a broader timeline and understand where we are in our own narrative, it's a little bit, there's a little bit of a pressure release valve there. You may be impatient. That's normal. You know you're a superhero, right? Like, why doesn't everyone know it yet? Be patient. Keep going. Fake it till you make it, like I've been doing this whole presentation, and just trust the process. And then trust the ensemble. Who or what is it that gets you back up when you're down? You're going to have some downs. That's a given. It's not a straight line. So what is it that gives you strength? What zaps your strength? What's your spinach? I worked hard, but I also had a ton of help. So make a list of those people and help others and pay it forward. That's really how things happen. And don't give your power away to superheroes. Be the superhero in some small way. Do what you do best and know that it's having an impact on someone or something. This is a scary time that we're all in right now, I think. But be brave, be confident, charge forward, and be a superhero. Thank you. Feel free to take a photo. I didn't want to throw a million QR codes over everything, but these are some of the URLs that I talked about. Check me out on Instagram. These are some of the books that I mentioned. Yeah, and
you have books in the back.
And I have books in the back. If anyone wants them, you can Venmo me $10 or whatever you feel like paying. But if you want a physical book, they're back there. If you prefer audiobook or ebook, it's on Audible, and you can listen to me talk to you for 16 hours.
I think we have time for a question. Okay, very enthusiastic.
Thank you for this talk. In your imagination, when you consider possible apocalypses, what are the really good ones?
The really good ones.
Are there any that have a sense of beauty, maybe rebirth in really profound ways. Rides
Yeah.
you'd like to be along for, even if everything's cataclysmic.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, when people talk about like the end of the world as we know it, it's generally a very localized thought. Like, yeah, there's the movie thing where like a meteor hits the earth and everyone explodes. Like, I'm not interested in that. If that happens, like, see ya, it's been real. If there are a lot of places around the world where the end of the world as they know it has already happened, right? There's a lot of war-torn areas. There's a lot of disasters that have hit where their entire life has been upended in a irreplaceable way. And who gives a shit what's happening 10,000 miles away? Their reality is forever changed. So these apocalypses are happening on a local level already all the time and have been for years. So when I think of like what an apocalypse looks like, it's probably a hyper-localized experience. It might just be your neighborhood, right, at a certain point. I don't have some big grand conspiracy theory. I think maybe at some point the power is going to go off for like an extended period of time for any number of reasons. And so who cares what the reason is exactly? If my power's off in my house, in my neighborhood for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, how do we deal with that, right? And probably if the best case scenario is making friends and knowing your neighbors and knowing what each person can help with, who's a doctor, who knows water sanitation, who's a plumber, all of these trades that sometimes get short shrift or get disrespected are going to become real important. And so knowing people who can do different things can be a really beautiful coming together, I think, where we are not just all on our screens and clacking away, but actually learning how to do new things with each other, and how can I barter what I can do for what you can do and create this nice symbiotic relationship like that. So that's kind of the vision I have of, if this were to happen, even if it's short-lived 2-3 weeks of difference, how do we make it a positive 2 to 3 weeks, as opposed to let me steal everyone's stuff and make sure no one's stealing my stuff and what you see in the movies, which I don't think will happen. I think people are better than that, ultimately.
Thank you. And I think that's probably all we have time for, but I don't know if you're hanging around for a couple minutes if people have questions directly. But other than that, thank you all so much for coming. We do this every third Friday somewhere around town. So if you're signed up for our newsletter or follow us on Instagram, look out for more info about our August talk in August. Thank you all so much.